Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best top laners for Season 5 patch 5.12. So first up on my list, I have Ryze. Now, Ryze did receive a pretty big nerf this patch, but overall, I still think he's a pretty strong pick because he's still a late game monster. If you can get past level 13 as Ryze, you're still going to be able to permaroot your opponent, and you're still going to deal a load of damage. His early game is just a little bit weaker now, which is definitely, I do think that these changes make him, or they put him in a better spot, because before he was just absolutely OP in the early game, and I do think that making his early game a little bit weaker brings for a little bit more counterplay, and therefore I think he's in a better spot right now, but I do still think he's a very strong pick. So some pros to Ryze are he is that late game monster still. He's a very bursty mage as well, and he can build tanky too, so he can build like a Frozen Heart, and he can still do a ton of damage. His passive is really strong too for just getting a load of burst off in team fights or if you're dueling your opponent, and he's got really good mobility when he has his ultimate. His ultimate's on like a 20-second cooldown, and you're basically gonna have that up all the time once you get that at max rank, because it lowers the cooldown every time you use an ability, I'm pretty sure. So you're just gonna have that up all the time come late game. He's also got strong AoE damage when his ultimate is up, and he can still permaroot with his W past level 13. He's also pretty easy to play. One con to Ryze is that he is now weaker in the early game after the nerfs. His passive duration got nerfed from 6 seconds, and now it's down to 2.5 seconds, and he can no longer permaroot in the early game. So I do think these changes to Ryze make him, or they put him in a better spot, but I do still think he's a very good pick. Next up on my list, I have Riven. So Riven is a pretty good pick against some of the meta top laners right now, like Ryze and Vladimir, and therefore I think she's a pretty good pick right now. So she can really take advantage of Ryze's weaker early game now, because she can just all in him at level 2 or 3, and Ryze really can't do too much because he can't like permaroot now at level 2. So I do think Riven is a much stronger pick now. She has insane snowball potential against those squishy mage top laners like the Vladimir and the Ryze, and she's got great CC as well with her Q and her W. Her shield is also really nice for just negating a ton of damage in the laning phase. She's also got crazy mobility with her Q and her E. Her burst damage is really good as well. If you can get level 6 and then get your full combo off on your opponent, your burst is just really good. She's also got really strong 2v1 potential if you can get ahead with Riven. If you can get ahead and get a few items, because of her strong CC and her strong burst damage, she can 2v1 squishies really easily if you know how to play Riven correctly. And like I said, she is good against Ryze in the early game. She also does not run on mana, so she can just spam out her abilities whenever they are up. A few cons to Riven are she does have some weaker lane matchups. Some of the ranged champions do counter her if she does not know how to play the matchup correctly, and she is weak if she does fall behind because she's squishy and she's an all-in champion. So if you do fall behind as Riven and you don't have the damage to burst down a squishy, then you're gonna be pretty useless. She is also a little bit harder to play in my opinion. Next up, I have Hecarim. So Hecarim, he stayed a pretty solid pick in the top lane. He has received some nerfs in the past, but I still do think that Hecarim top is a very strong pick for solo queue, because he's got really strong snowball potential, being able to run Ignite in the top lane, and if you can get that first kill on your opponent, then you're just going to be able to make some nice TP ganks down bot lane. You're going to be able to roam, and Hecarim is one of the strongest roaming top laners in the game, so I think that all around Hecarim is still a very solid pick. So pros to Hecarim are he can take a level 1 camp, and not a lot of top laners can do this. Hecarim is able to do this, which makes his laning phase even stronger because he's going to have a level advantage on his opponent in the top lane. He's got good mobility as well with his E and his ultimate. His engage is one of the best engages in the game because his E, he's just got great mobility with that, and then he can jump in on the backline with his ultimate, which is just a really strong engage. He's very snowbally as well. Like I said, if you can get that first kill in the early game, you can just take off with Hecarim, and he's got one of the best mid-game power spikes. Once you do pick up that Trinity Force, he starts to deal a ton of damage. He's a bruiser as well, so all I like to build on Hecarim is Trinity Force. Sometimes I'll go for like a Youmuu's Ghostblade if I'm really far ahead, but Trinity Force and full tank on Hecarim is definitely usually the way to go. He's got good sustain as well with his W in the laning phase, and like I said, his TP ganks are really strong for solo queue if you know how to use them correctly. One con to Hecarim is that he does have some harder lane matchups against some of the ranged top laners. Next up, I have Vladimir. So Vladimir is a really good top laner because once you do hit that level 9 as Vladimir, you can basically duel any other top laner in the game as long as you play it correctly, because once you do hit level 9 as Vladimir, you get your Q down to like a 2 or 3 second cooldown, and you can just keep spamming that out and sustaining a load of health. So I do think Vladimir is one of the strongest laners. You just got to be careful about his early game. Like from levels 1 to 4, he's pretty weak and he can get killed by someone like a Riven if you do not manage your cooldowns correctly. So just be careful in that early game. But once you do get past like level 6 on Vladimir is really good as well, and you can just take off if you can get a few kills as him. He's got strong AoE damage as well with his E, his W, and his ultimate. He's one of the strongest team fighters because of his AoE damage, and the damage that you get with Vladimir late game is just really good, and it makes him one of the strongest late game champions in the game. He's also very hard to gank in the laning phase because he's got invulnerability with his W, and if you do have your flash up as well, it's just going to be really hard to gank a Vladimir unless he's pushed out all the way into the enemy's tower. And a few cons to Vladimir is that he does have a weaker early game, like I said. Just be careful those first few levels, because if you're playing against someone like a Riven, if she knows how to play Riven, she can definitely take advantage of your cooldown. So for example, if you use your Q on a minion, then the Riven, if she's smart, she'll just go for an all-in on you because she knows that you don't have the damage and that your Q is on like a 9-second cooldown at rank 1. And he does also not have as strong CC as some of the other top laners. So number 1 on my list for patch 5.12 is Aurelia again. Aurelia has been like one of the strongest top laners for a very long time. It seems like it doesn't really matter what meta it is, Aurelia is still going to be a very strong pick. So pros to Aurelia are she's got a great mid game power spike because of that Trinity Force. She's also got a very strong level 6 because once you pick up that Sheen as Aurelia, you're going to be able to get a load of Sheen procs off with your ultimate, with your Q, your W, and your E, which just makes her a very good laner. She's also a great duelist because if you can get that 2-second stun off on the opponent, you're gonna win that fight like 99% of the time, especially if you do have your Sheen. So she's one of the strongest duelists in the game. She's got true damage on her W as well, which makes her an even stronger duelist, and her sustain is pretty good in the laning phase as well with her W. Her gap closer is really nice for just setting up easy trades in the laning phase because, for example, if you can Q to a low health minion, stun your opponent, and then Q them as well, you're pretty much going to win the trade every time. And you can also use it to just jump on the opponent when you're in team fight, so it's just an all-around really nice ability. She's got pretty good wave clear as well with her ultimate, which is on a pretty short cooldown. She's a bruiser, so you can basically only build Trinity Force on Aurelia and still do a load of damage and then just go full tank after that. Sometimes I'll build Blade of the Ruined King, but I just find myself going Trinity Force full tank on Aurelia and still doing really good damage. One con to Aurelia is that she does have a weaker early game, so in the early game I'd recommend starting Crystalline Flask as Aurelia so you can sustain that early game, because her levels like 1 to 5 are quite weak, and if the opponents know how to play the matchup correctly, then she could take advantage of your weaker early game. So just be careful in the first few levels when playing as Aurelia. So first up on the honorable mentions, I have Wukong. Wukong is a pretty solid top laner with the Black Cleaver. The item just synergizes so well with him, so if you're looking for a strong teamfight top laner, then Wukong is definitely a very good pick right now. Next I have Rumble. Rumble, he's one of my favorite top laners. I think Rumble was the first champion I ever bought, and he just feels so rewarding if you can land a good ultimate in a team fight as Rumble. His ultimate is really game changing, and you don't even need to have like a strong laning phase as Rumble. As long as you can pick up the Haunting Guys and get the Sork boots come mid game, his damage is really good. all you really have to do is land a good ultimate with Rumble in a team fight and your job is done. So I do think that if you know how to land Rumble's ultimate, then he can be a very rewarding champion, but if you can't land it, then you are going to be missing out on a lot of his potential. So if you haven't played Rumble, play him in some normal games first and get used to his ultimate and then head into ranked. Next I have Malphite. So the changes to Malphite make him even stronger now against AD composition. So if the enemies are running like a 2 or 3 AD comp, I would definitely recommend picking up Malphite because he's just able to build a ton of armor and be insanely tanky come late game. He also does quite a bit of damage, so if you're looking for that strong tank top laner, then Malphite is definitely a pretty good pick. Next on the honorable mentions, I have Jax. Jax received some pretty good buffs this patch to his ultimate, and I think this makes him a much stronger pick right now. He's a lot more tanky because of the buffs to his ultimate, and that just allows him to duel even better once he hits level 6 now. He's one of the strongest late game champions too, so if you're looking for a good scaling top laner, then Jax is definitely a very good pick. Next up on the honorable mentions, I have Shen. Shen is seeing quite a bit of play in the competitive scene right now, especially in the European region. I think that he's a pretty good pick for solo queue as well. He's got a pretty good laning phase now with the recent buffs he got to his passive as well as his E, and I think he's not like top 5 worthy obviously because he does lack damage, but if your team does need a tank top laner, just like a full tank top laner, then I would definitely recommend trying out Shen. Next, I have Echo. So Echo is also still a pretty good top laner, even after the nerfs that he did receive this patch. The nerfs weren't too major. His Q did get a little bit of a damage nerf, and his ultimate now does cost mana. He also got some other nerf to his like attack speed or something, but overall I still think he's a pretty good pick. If you can land a multi-man W in a team fight, then that is just game changing right there, and he's just a really strong assassin. So if your team does need an assassin for the top lane, then I would recommend picking up Echo. Rounding out the honorable mentions is going to be Nasus. Nasus is one of the strongest late game top lane tanks in the game, so if you're looking for one of those, then I would definitely recommend picking him up. As long as you can farm in the early game as Nasus and get your Q stacking, then come late game, he's just going to be pretty much unkillable. He's going to be able to 1 or 2 shot the enemy AD carry. So I do think that Nasus, he's pretty easy to play as well. So if you're looking for that top lane tank, then I would recommend trying out Nasus. So that is all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed, then don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.